Hello everyone and welcome back to Down to the Tyre. Now, I know it's been a little while since my last episode. I'm really sorry. It's been a very hectic few months and I feel like, Formula 3 ended. There's been a massive gap between the Formula 2 rounds with Abu Dhabi not even having happened yet. So I've not really felt like I've had a lot to talk about, but today's topic has come to the rescue because I'm going to do a preview of the Macau Grand Prix. Now, I made a TikTok about the Macau Grand Prix and it was super popular. Everyone was asking lots of questions in the comments. Obviously, this is the first time it's actually happened since 2019 due to COVID. So I feel like it's the perfect time to kind of introduce you to it, give you a bit of background info and preview the 2023 race, the drivers, and give some predictions. So without further ado, let's get started. So this race is formally called the 70th Macau Grand Prix FIA F3 World Cup. So I'm just going to call it the Macau Grand Prix for the sake of this video because that's a very long name and I understand why they've chosen to shorten it. So the Macau Grand Prix is basically a planned motor race for Formula 3 cars which is scheduled to be held on the streets of Macau on the 19th of November 2023. I'm currently recording this on the 8th of November, so it's only a couple of weeks away. It serves as a non-championship round of the FIA F3 Championship, which obviously we already know that Gabriel Bortoleto has won that championship, so there won't be any points from this round that will count towards that championship at all, but it's still considered an FIA F3 round because it's using those cars. The race itself is made up of two races, so there's a 10-lap qualifying race that decides the starting grid for the 15-lap main event. The track itself, as I said before, it's a street circuit. It's a temporary street circuit which is 6.12 kilometres in length. So that means that the qualifying race, which is 10 laps, will be 61.2 kilometres and the main race, which is 15 laps, will be 91.8 kilometres. As I said at the start when I mentioned the formal title of the Macau Grand Prix, it's the 70th running of the Macau Grand Prix, the 38th running for Formula 3 cars and the 5th edition of the FIA F3 World Cup. Now, this will actually be the first Macau that I've been able to watch because I got into feeder series during lockdown when obviously it wasn't happening because international drivers couldn't travel to Macau for it to happen. So at that point, it was just a F4 round, a Chinese F4 round for local drivers. But I'm so excited to be able to watch it in full. It's live streamed on the FIA website and the FIA YouTube channel if you want to watch it. That's another question that I've been asked quite a few times. So it will be available on there for everyone to watch in full. And I'm so excited to get the opportunity to watch it. It's so prestigious and I'll explain a little bit more about that as time goes on because as I go through the driver list, you may notice that there are a few drivers on there who you wouldn't expect to be doing an F3 race, so I'll explain why as well. So let's get started with some background information. So the Macau Grand Prix is a race that's considered by drivers as a stepping stone to higher motor racing categories such as Formula 1. And obviously with a lot of drivers who are currently in Formula 3, Formula 2, they didn't get to do the Macau Grand Prix back when they were in F3 because it's been cancelled for 2020, 2021 and 2022. So a lot of drivers are taking a step back so they're able to give it a go because they missed out on that opportunity while they were at that level of feeder series. And also just because it's considered such a prestigious race, such a prestigious stepping stone, and the fact that it's the 70th anniversary of the race, I think a lot of drivers are very eager to be involved. The event was made a non-championship round of the FIA F3 Championship for the first time in 2019, before the COVID pandemic caused heavy disruptions, particularly concerning the entry of foreign drivers into Macau, as I said before, because they were having to travel during COVID-19, which wasn't allowed. So this caused the race to be held just as a domestic Formula 4 event for 3 years, and this was as a round of the Chinese F4 Championship because those drivers were able to get into Macau and race there compared to the international drivers who weren't able to. So in 2023, Formula 3 is returning to Macau, as I've said, and the Grand Prix will celebrate its 70th anniversary. And because of this, the organisers have expanded the event over 2 weekends. So the first weekend will see domestic and Asian series like it has done for the past 3 years while COVID's been happening. And then the Formula 3 title race will be held over the second weekend on the 19th of November. Because it is an FIA F3 round, despite being a non-championship round, all competitors will use an identical Dallara F3 2019 chassis with a 3.4 litre naturally aspirated V6 engine developed by Macau, and all teams will compete with tyres supplied by Pirelli, as they did in the FIA F3 Championship throughout this entire year. As I go through the list of teams and drivers, you'll notice that the teams are pretty much identical to the teams who raced in the FIA F3 Championship, except for regular season entry PHM Racing by Charouz have confirmed that they will not take part in the event because they're still completing the takeover of the Charouz entry PHMR, so they're deciding to opt out of Macau because they're still working through that. So that means that the teams we have competing in Macau are Trident, Genza, Prema, High-Tech Pulsate, Campos, Van Amersfoort, ART Grand Prix, Roden Carlin and MP Motorsport. So now I'm going to go through each team, speak about who they're entering into the Macau Grand Prix and kind of give my thoughts on how they're going to do and make some predictions, I guess, and see who I think will come out on top. So we'll start off with Trident, and Trident's first entry is a very interesting one because it's actually the reigning champion of Macau, Richard Verschoor. So obviously he's been doing F2 at the moment, and yes, he's going to be stepping back down to F3, which everyone is always very confused about. But if you were the reigning champion of a race that hasn't happened for 3 years due to COVID, I feel like you'd probably want to, go back there as one of the more experienced drivers and try and, retain your crown and win it for a second time. So even though Richard Verschoor has been in Formula 2 with Van Amersfoort this year, he will be returning to Trident, who he has previously competed with in Formula 2 before, to give Macau another shot and see if he can retain that title of Macau race winner. He will be joined by another Formula 2 driver, this time a driver who has actually raced for Trident this year in Formula 2, Roman Stanek. So far, Stanek has a best finish of 5th from his rookie season in Formula 2, and he was an FIA F3 race winner last year when he did the full championship. So I feel like he does definitely have recent experience in the F3 car, which might really help him. And Trident's third driver will be the recently crowned Euro 4 champion Ugo Chukwu. He's a McLaren junior. He's in his second year of single-seater racing, having come third in British Formula 4 in 2022, third in F4 UAE this year, and second in Italian F4 and first in Euro 4. Trident's team manager commented that the Macau Grand Prix is a legendary race full of charm and history, and it embodies the essence of racing. It runs on a challenging and unforgiving street track that always highlights the most talented drivers. We will compete in this classic race with a lineup that is new, but also interesting and competitive. It brings together experience, freshness and talent. Verschoor, Stanek and Ugo Chukwu are a really well sorted and high quality trio. We will do our best to maximise the work with our drivers. Our goal is to allow them to make the most of their chances in a race that has always been followed with great attention at all levels. Now, I think he's spot on here. I think he's got so much experience within his team, both with Verschoor having done quite a few F2 seasons, so he's obviously one of the more experienced drivers on the grid, and then Stanek, who did F3 last year, so he's already very used to the car. Ugo Chukwu is not experienced in F3 at all. This will actually be his first time driving the F3 car, but I think that will really, be great experience for him. He's been announced as doing FRACA next year, so it will be quite a step up for him doing Formula 3 in this race, but I think it will really, really help him to develop as a driver, and I think it's great that Trident have able to take some really experienced drivers and then drivers who have less experience and put them together and allow them to all learn from each other, and I think it's going to be a really strong lineup for the race. Next we have Genza Motorsport, who are definitely bringing a lineup with a lot less experience than Trident did. So their three drivers will be Max Esterson, Charlie Wirtz and Matthias Zagazeta. Now I'll speak about Max Esterson first. He's just come from GB3 and he has also done a couple of races in Formula 3. So he is probably the most experienced driver when it comes to that Formula 3 car, as the other two haven't driven the Formula 3 car competitively in races yet. But I think Max Esterson, even though he is one of the lesser experienced drivers on the grid, I think he does stand a good chance having done those few F3 rounds this year. And I do know that he is a very talented driver. I've seen him in GB3 throughout the years. So yeah, I'm really excited to see him get that opportunity. And I'm really excited to see a GB3 driver get the opportunity to step up as well. There are a couple of others on this list later on that I'm going to speak about. But yeah, it's great to see Max Esterson on this list. Now I'll speak a bit about Charlie Verse. So as I said, he's not driven the F3 car competitively in a race, but he has done the Formula 3 post-season test in October 2023. So he does have recent experience in that car, despite not having actually raced it competitively wheel-to-wheel with the other drivers. He won Formula Regional at Oceania this year, and he also competed in the Formula Regional European Championship and Euroformula Open. Matthias Zagazita is another driver who has competed in the Formula Regional European Championship this year. He also took part in the FIA F3 post-season test in 2022, last year, driving for Charoux's racing system during the final 2 days. And this year he partook in it with Genza Motorsport, hence why it makes sense that he's racing for them in Macau. So for both of these drivers, even though they actually haven't competed in F3 or driven the F3 car competitively wheel to wheel, I do think the fact that they've both taken part in this recent post-season test for F3 with Genza, I think that's going to really help them because they've had such recent experience in the car, and I think, that will really help them settle into Macau. Obviously, Macau is a really tough race to be taking your first step in an F3 car in. It's probably, one of the toughest ways to introduce yourself to Formula 3, but I'm sure that will really help them both to develop and grow. Now we're moving on to Prema, and it's no surprise that Prema have a really, really strong lineup for Macau. They will retain 2 out of 3 drivers from their 2023 FIA F3 lineup, Dino Beganovic and Paul Aron. Now, we all know that Paul Aron had a stronger season than Dino Beganovic in Formula 3 this year. I've, spoken openly about the fact that really did surprise me. I was expecting Dino to kind of be Prema's golden boy this year, but it was in fact Zach O'Sullivan who performed the best out of the 3 of them. But I still thought that Dino would be up there and it would be Paul Aron who would struggle to adapt a little bit, but I was wrong. Aron finished 3rd in the standings, so he's probably the most likely driver to do well in Macau based on that, since he did the best in the FIA F3 season out of the 3 drivers on Prema's lineup. But I do also think that the rest of their lineup is very talented, so I wouldn't be surprised if all 3 drivers are up there near the top. And of course, Prema's 3rd driver, Gabriele Mini, who they've nicked from High Tech, is also very experienced in the F3 car, having competed in the full season this year alongside Dino Beganovic and Paul Aron. So yeah, I think all 3 drivers, having just finished the full FIA F3 season, are going to be really, really strong in Macau. They're very used to the car, particularly Dino and Paul, who are used to the Prema car. But Gabriele Mini is clearly very talented as well, and he'll be racing with the team in 2024 for the full season, so I'm sure this will be a really nice way for him to ease into the team and really get used to it. Now I'm moving on to High Tech Pulse 8. Now they're retaining 1 driver from their FIA F3 lineup for 2023, and then 2 new drivers will be coming on board, except for one of them isn't new to the team entirely. Actually, neither of their other 2 drivers are new to the team entirely, because the other 2 drivers alongside Luke Browning, who's the driver that they've retained from their 2023 FIA F3 lineup, are Isaac Hadjar and Alex Dunn. Now, Isaac Hadjar obviously is part of their F2 team this year, and I feel like he has probably stepped back down to do Macau, because when he did FIA F3 last year, it didn't run, so he missed that opportunity. So I think it's likely that he has requested to be able to come back and do it, so he doesn't miss out on that opportunity because of COVID taking away that opportunity when he did do his full season. I'd say he hasn't been one of the most impressive drivers in Formula 2 for me this year. I feel like Jack Crawford outperformed him, which I did not expect going into the season. Helmut Marko seems very fond of Isaac Hadjar though, giving him FP1 opportunities and things like that. So I feel like maybe his results don't reflect his true talent, and Helmut Marko sees something in him beyond that. Obviously, we know that Helmut Marko is very cutthroat when it comes to junior drivers, so if he is giving someone opportunities and he is, championing them and helping them out, then it does probably mean they have a lot of potential. So I think maybe Hadjar's better than he's shown this year in Formula 2, because, I was expecting him to outperform Crawford and that didn't happen. And then their other driver who's new to their team is Alex Dunn, who has stepped up from GB3. I actually just made a TikTok about this last night, saying that I think Alex Dunn is almost certain to get that 3rd High Tech Pulse 8 seat in Formula 3 for the full 2024 season if he manages to get his budget sorted together. I'm not sure what his situation is with budget, but if it isn't in place, then if he does manage to get it in place, then I'm sure he'll get that seat. And if it's already in place, then I think he's absolutely a shoo-in for that seat. He came 1st in British F4 last year, 2nd in Italian F4, and then this year he came 2nd in the GB3 Championship as a runner-up to Callum Voisin. So yeah, with a racing record like that, the past 3 championships he's done, he's come P2, P1, P2. I think he absolutely deserves that shot in FIA F3. And if he does get that shot with Hi-Tech, he will be taking the exact same career trajectory as his Macau Grand Prix teammate Luke Browning, who also competed in GB3 with Hi-Tech. He obviously won that championship. Alex Dunn came second, and then Luke Browning was able to progress to FIA F3 with the same team. So if Alex Dunn manages to also do the same, he will be following that same career path, except for coming second in GB3 and progressing to FIA F3 rather than winning it. But it's still the same career path, and I think he absolutely is deserving of it. The GB3 championship was so close this year. It really could have been either his, Callum Voisin's, or Joseph Lokes. It was right down to the wire. So as I've already mentioned, Luke Browning is Hi-Tech's 3rd driver for the Macau Grand Prix. He is their driver that they're retaining from their full 2023 FIA F3 season. I think it's quite likely that he's going to be doing another year in F3 next year, but that's not confirmed yet. And yeah, no, I'm really excited to see how he does in this Macau race, because obviously, just like Dino Bogdanovic, Paul Arrow and Gabriele Mini, who are racing for Prema, Luke has had this full year in the FIA F3 car. So he's absolutely used to it. He knows what he's doing. It's with the same team that he's been with all year, same team that he's been with for a couple of years now. So yeah, I really think he's in the best position possible to do well in this race. Now we move on to Campos Racing, who are retaining 2 out of 3 of their FIA F3 lineup from this year, and then they've nabbed 1 driver over from Hi-Tech GP. And I've already mentioned 2 Hi-Tech GP full-time 2023 F3 drivers in Luke Browning and Gabriele Mini. So obviously the driver that they've nabbed is Sebastian Montoya. Sebastian has been a Red Bull Junior this year. I think, honestly, he's had quite a bit of bad luck in his F3 season. I really don't think his results have been representative of what he's capable of. I think he really did deserve more. I think there were a lot of little things that, made his season quite inconsistent. And yeah, I don't think his results have fully captured what he's capable of yet. Whether Red Bull will retain him or not, I'm not sure. But yeah, I do think he's capable of more. He's got that full year experience in FIA F3 behind him now, and I do think that maybe a switch to Campos will be a good career move for him. Obviously, I'm not sure what he's doing long term next year, but for this race, even, I think maybe trying out a new team might be a good move. And Campos obviously had quite a bit of success this year with Pepe Marti in Formula 3, who has also recently been announced to be a Red Bull Junior. I feel like Red Bull, their academy is so chaotic. They're just constantly picking new drivers up, dropping some, picking some up. It's honestly chaotic. I can't keep up with who is a Red Bull Junior or not anymore. But Pepe Marti is a Red Bull Junior officially, and that's likely to go into the 2024 season because they only signed him at the end of the F3 2023 season. He ended up in 5th in the FIA F3 Championship. I honestly think it could have been so much more. I don't think 5th is representative of his season. He really was the driver who was challenging Gabriel Bortoleto for the majority of the year. So I do think he's an incredibly strong driver. He's done 2 years in Formula 3 now. I think taking time out to do Winter Series between his 2 seasons of FIA F3 was a genius move from him. And I think that absolutely helped him to progress when he did come back to FIA F3, because he came back and he seemed like a completely different driver after doing that 2023 Formula Regional Middle East Championship with Pinnacle Van Amersfoort Racing during the winter. And then Campos' 3rd driver is Ollie Goethe, who I've just realised I said they were retaining 2 of their drivers. They are absolutely not. Ollie Goethe raced for Trident this year, not Campos. So please ignore that, because I can't be bothered to go back and re-record that or edit that. We'll keep the mistake in. Nobody's perfect, but Ollie Goethe isn't not being retained for the same team because he did not race for Campos in this year's FIA F3. He raced for Trident. So, in fact, Campos have retained 1 of their drivers in Pepe Marti, and they have taken on 2 new drivers with Sebastian Montoya and Ollie Goethe. Sorry about that. So let's talk about Ollie Goethe now, who was a Trident driver for the majority of 2023 and is now racing for Campos in Macau. So I think Ollie Goethe had a bit of a F3 season, which, I don't know, I think a lot of people were pretty disappointed by after he subbed in for a few drivers at the very last minute back in 2022. I think a lot of people were expecting a lot more from him. He finished 8th in the standings with 73 points, and his first round in Bahrain was pretty successful. But unfortunately from then on it really seemed to drop off. He did do well in the Silverstone feature race with a race win there. But yeah, he had so many rounds that he just got no points. Monaco being an example, Barcelona being an example. So I just don't think he lived up to the expectation, unfortunately, that he set when he did sub in for a few rounds back in 2022. But now he's got more experience in the F3 car. I definitely think he has potential in Macau. So yeah, I'm excited to see how he does. Now we'll move on to Van Amersfoort Racing, who one of their drivers I wasn't really familiar with going into this video, I'll be honest. So I had to do a bit of research, and that driver is Noel Leon. Hope I'm pronouncing that right, because as I said, I'm not really familiar with him. But then I realised very quickly that's because I don't really follow Euro Formula Open that much. And that's honestly where he's probably most known for, because he is the 2023 Euro Formula Open champion. So yeah, that's definitely a feeder series I need to pay more attention to. He competed with Crypto Tower Racing Team. He previously competed in the Formula Regional European Championship with Arden Motorsport, and he was the 2019 to 2020 NACAM F4 champion. Wow, that's a real mouthful. And the 2021 F4 US champion. So clearly, he's got a lot of championships under his belt, and I just haven't been paying enough attention. And he also partook in the FIA F3 postseason test with Van Amersfoort Racing. So I think that's going to have perfectly set him up to do really well at Macau, because obviously he's one of the less experienced drivers when it comes to the F3 car. But he's tested with Van Amersfoort in F3 very recently. He's got experience in that car, even though it's not a full season or wheel-to-wheel racing. So yeah, while he's one of the less experienced drivers on the grid, I'm excited to see how he does. Van Amersfoort's second driver is Sophia Flörsch, and I think, honestly, she might be the most famous from Macau. I think a lot of people who are unfamiliar with Macau as a race are definitely familiar with Macau from her horrendous crash she had back in 2018. During this crash, there are lots of videos on YouTube. Obviously, I don't really particularly encourage watching crash videos if the driver was seriously harmed, but I think now we know that Sophia's okay, she's fully recovered, I will say go and watch that crash, because it's insane. During the main race, on lap 4, she made contact with Jehan Daruvala, who was reportedly slowing for an erroneously displayed yellow flag on the straight between turn 2 and turn 3. This caused a front left suspension failure, which absolutely catapulted her car into the Lisboa bend sideways at high speed, launching off another driver's car through the fencing and smashing right into the photographer's bunker before landing back onto the wheels. She was reported as conscious post-crash and was hospitalised alongside the other driver who was involved in the crash and 2 photographers and a marshal. She was later diagnosed with a spinal fracture, for which she underwent a 10-hour-long surgery, subsequently reported as successful with no fear of paralysis by the race team leader, who she was also with the Van Amersfoort team back then as well. So yeah, she's obviously a very, very brave driver, because she's returning to the same track with the same team, but I have full faith in her. She seems absolutely fearless. She's incredible. I think she's just such an amazing role model, and I'm really excited to see how she does, because yeah, I think she's honestly just an incredible driver, and the fact that she's returning to that track in the same team, in the same car, as she did when she had that horrendous crash, I just think is really admirable. I think she's definitely one to pay attention to. And finally, we have Tommy Smith, who did a full season with Van Amersfoort in F3 this year. So I don't really have too much to say about him. He obviously came from GB3 before that. He didn't have a very standout season this year in F3. There were moments where he showed great potential. But yeah, I think this year was a lot of learning for him, a lot of getting used to the car, getting used to those European circuits that he hadn't previously raced on. So yeah, I think Macau will be just the same. I think he's got that experience under his belt with the team, so I think that's going to really help him. And yeah, we'll see how he does. Oh, it's getting quite tiring going through all these teams, but we've got 3 to go. So now we're on to ART Grand Prix. So their lineup, honestly, I was expecting some bigger names from them, maybe some drivers who would step back in from F2 or something like that, maybe like Victor Martin's coming to do it, but they actually have quite a young and inexperienced lineup, which I think is really interesting from a team as established as them. So they will be promoting Lawrence Van Hopen from their Formula Regional European Championship team, because he's just done the full season there with ART Grand Prix. They will be promoting him, and he will be racing in Macau with them. just very predictably, like the rest, he joined them for post-season testing in Formula 3. So I think a lot of teams clearly use that post-season test as an opportunity to kind of trial drivers, give them some experience before Macau. And yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Van Hopen's been with the team for a while. He also did the 2022 Formula Regional European Championship with ART. That was when he was a teammate with Gabriele Mini and Mari Boyer. Obviously now both of those drivers have progressed to doing full-time F3 seasons, so I'm sure Lawrence wants to achieve that same feat. The next driver is Christian Mansell, who competed in the full 2023 FIA F3 season with Campos. He also previously competed in the 2023 Euro Formula Open Championship, and he finished third in the standings overall, and he also finished third in GB3 in 2021. In October, he joined ART for that post-season test, so I imagine ART may be considering him for the full season this year, which would be great to see him get to join a top team and really show what he's capable of in FIA F3, because he did have a relatively strong season this year. He came 12th in the standings with 60 points and 2 podium finishes, which I think is more than a lot of people expected from him. I don't think anyone expected him to do that well. Obviously, he was with Campos, who ended up having a very strong season and probably a stronger season than they've had in recent years. So that will have obviously benefited him. But yeah, I think he has had a really strong season. He ended the F3 season in Monza with a 7th and an 8th place. So I think he's probably got a lot of momentum behind him now. And yeah, I'm really intrigued to see how he does at Macau. And I'm intrigued to see if ART sign him for the full 2024 F3 season, because I think if they've, selected him for Macau, selected him for the post-season test, then that's very, very likely. And then they have also retained one of their F3 2023 full-time race drivers, Nicola Solov, to race in the Macau Grand Prix with them. Now, Nicola is probably the most experienced driver in this team in terms of the fact that he has raced with ART in F3. Obviously, Lawrence Van Hopen has raced with ART but in different championships. And then Christian Mansell has raced in the F3 championship with a different team. But Nicola has both done the F3 full season this year, and he has raced it with ART. So I think he's probably the most experienced and most accomplished driver going into this based on that. Like he's used to the team, he knows his surroundings, and I think that will really help him. He's also part of the Alpine Academy. He's the current champion of the F4 Spanish Championship. So yeah, I think he's, his F3 season probably didn't go as well as he was hoping this year. I think he had a lot of hype around him, going into the season, and it maybe didn't quite work out as well as he was expecting. His best finish this year was 22nd, which obviously isn't what people were expecting from him. But yeah, no, I think, based on the fact that it was his first year in FIA F3, he's probably got a lot of learning and adapting to do coming straight from F4. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I think if he does come back in F3 next year, he will be a lot stronger. I think it might be a similar situation to Pepe Marti, where he, did one season, wasn't a standout, came back, and then suddenly is really good. So I'm looking forward to next year. Shortly after his FIA F3 season, he has competed in the 2023 Euro Cup 3 season. So I think he's kind of very similarly done what Pepe Marti did, where he's finished the F3 season and then gone on to do a different championship, really gained some more experience, and then come back with a lot more potential. And yeah, I think he really does stand a chance at being a standout driver in F3 next year. I think this year just was a lot of learning, a big learning curve for him. Obviously, nothing's been announced. We don't know what his plans are for next year. We don't know where he's going. But yeah, we'll see. But I do think in Macau, for the ART team, he's probably the most full package out of the bunch. It depends how well Mansell's F3 experience with Campos will transfer over to Macau. So yeah, we'll see. The next team is Roden Carlin, and now I did contemplate waiting to do this video because they actually haven't announced their third driver yet, but I just wanted to talk about it. I couldn't wait any longer. They're the only team who haven't announced their third and final driver. It's currently just TBA, so maybe, you know what, maybe it'll be Taylor Barnard. But obviously because his 3-letter initial is TBA, maybe they're just pranking us a little bit, because he hasn't been announced for Macau yet, which I'm quite surprised about. I thought he'd do it. But moving on to the actual drivers who have been confirmed, Zayn Maloney and Dan Ticktum. Now, this is a very experienced lineup from Carlin. You know, two drivers who are not actually in F3 this year, who have very much moved on in their careers but are obviously returning, probably for two very different reasons. Zayn Maloney, just like Isaac Hadjar, was in F3 last year. It was his rookie year and Macau didn't happen. So I imagine he is coming back just because he wants the chance to be able to say that he's raced in Macau. Dan Ticktum, on the other hand, it's a very different story because Dan Ticktum has raced in Macau and he has won it twice in 2017 and 2018. And I'm sure he wants to hat-trick it. I'm sure he wants to win it a third time. And he's obviously in Formula E now. He's got a very established career over there, which I think he's done very well for himself based on he had a bit of a tumultuous junior career. Obviously, I won't go into that fully here, but yeah, he had a pretty dramatic junior career. F2, he was dropped by a couple of driver academies and it was looking quite unlikely that he was going to go to F1, but instead of crumbling and, you know, fading into nothing, he actually made a very strong career for himself in Formula E, which I think is very impressive. And yeah, no, I'm really excited to see his comeback to Macau because yeah, he's probably the most experienced driver of the bunch. I'd say Richard Verschoor is probably the second most experienced driver, the reigning Macau F3 champion. But also, I think Dan Ticktum stands a very good chance. I don't know how he's going to adapt back to F3 machinery. That could be quite difficult for him. I have also just noticed there's one driver who I haven't spoken about yet who is arguably equally as experienced, if not more experienced, than Dan Ticktum. So I'll get to that next because I've still got MP Motorsport to talk about. But yeah, I think Dan Ticktum is a super impressive driver. You know, controversies aside, and yeah, I'm excited to see whether he does manage to become a 3-time Macau winner because that would be pretty impressive. I think he'd be the first driver to ever do that. So I can obviously see why he's tempted to try. And then finally we have MP Motorsport. So they are retaining one driver from their FIA F3 lineup who will also be racing for them in F2 next year. And then they're retaining one driver from their FIA F3 lineup who hasn't been announced for anything next year, but I imagine he'll be staying in F3. And then they're taking one driver from IndyCar. So yeah, let's talk about that. I'll start with Franco Colapinto and I'll go in the order that I mentioned them in. So Franco Colapinto obviously had a very successful F3 season. I honestly feel like he kind of came from nowhere. Like, I obviously knew he was a really good driver, but I just didn't quite realise he was so close to the championship fight. I kind of just thought he was like, you know, top 10 but not near the top, but then he ended up 4th in the championship with 110 points, only 2 points behind Paul Aron in 3rd. And it amazes me honestly how I was just oblivious to how well he was doing for the majority of the year. He was just kind of there, you know, consistently doing well, consistently performing, always in the points. Not always, he obviously did have some non-points finishes, but for the majority of the season he was finishing in the points, and I think that just kind of made me overlook him a lot because he wasn't always on the podium or at the top or winning the races, but he was always, a bit like Felipe Drugovich did in Formula 2 when he won the championship. Felipe was always there or thereabouts, even on the races where he wasn't able to win or get a podium, he was always still consistently finishing in the points, and I think consistency was the key to Franco Colapinto's success in his FIA F3 season this year. And yeah, I'm delighted to see that he's stepping up to Formula 2 with MP. I think that's a great match. He's going to be teammates with Dennis Hauger, who will be in his 3rd year of F2. He's a very experienced driver, so I'm sure he'll learn a lot from them. And it seems he's also being retained by the Williams Academy, which is great news. Next we have Mari Boyer, who most recently has been doing the 2023 Euro Cup season with MP Motorsport alongside his Formula 3 campaign. He tested with MP in the 2022 F3 post-season test, and then they announced his signing for the full year this year. And yeah, I think Mari Boyer has honestly had a pretty consistent and good season, considering the fact that it was his first in Formula 3. Obviously, he's not been like that high up. He was 17th in the standings overall with 29 points, but I honestly think that for a rookie, I obviously know there's other rookies who have stepped into it and completely dominated, like Gabriel Bortoleto. Obviously, Mari Boyer wasn't one of those, but I still do think that based on the fact that he was a rookie and this was likely to be a pretty big learning year for him. He didn't have a bad season at all. He finished the season with 2-point scoring finishes in Monza. So I think really that shows that the momentum is on his side. And, you know, I think next year will be a big year for him once it's confirmed what his plans are. But yeah, sticking with MP for Macau like he's been with for the whole year, I think that's a really good move. I think, you know, he's probably got kind of the average amount of experience of the grid. I'd say that, like, a lot of the grid are drivers who have done the F3 season this year, and that was their first season in F3, and now they're coming to do Macau. So he's, you know, in that group, which I think is the vast majority of the grid are in that group, I'd say. And yeah, no, I'm excited to see how he does. It's hard to predict, because yeah, his rookie season was very up and down in FIF3, and that lack of consistency explains why he only finished 17th in the standings. But yeah, he seems like a solid driver, and I'm excited to see how he does. But now, with no further ado, I have to talk about MP's third driver, because it's Marcus Armstrong. Now, many of you will probably know Marcus Armstrong as an IndyCar driver. He's been in IndyCar for the past year. Before that, he did 3 seasons of Formula 2 where he came 30th all 3 times. And then before that, he was in Formula 3 and he came runner-up in 2019. Now, he has done Macau before, and he's done it twice, and he finished 8th both times. So he's done 3 F2 seasons and come 13th all 3 times. He's done 2 Macau Grand Prix and come 8th both times. You can't knock his consistency, honestly. But yeah, he's obviously one of the way more experienced drivers who's on the Macau grid this year. Probably he kind of is from the same generation of rookies as Tictum in my mind. So yeah, I'd probably say that those 2 together are the most experienced. Obviously, they're the 2 drivers who are coming into Macau from somewhere other than like F2, F3. Other than another Formula 1 feeder series. They're both kind of in their full-time driver careers now. You know, they're no longer junior feeder series drivers, they're just drivers. So yeah, it's going to be really intriguing to see how they do. Obviously, Marcus Armstrong's not been in an F3 car since 2019, so that's going to be an interesting one to watch. But also, having said that, I reckon his experience will probably massively help him. So yeah, no, I feel like I just can't wait to see how he does. It's going to be so weird seeing him competing against, you know, drivers who are obviously quite a bit younger than him. I saw a meme on Twitter which said, like, Marcus Armstrong and Dan Tictum when they, you know, they're on the Macau grid going past, you know, F3 drivers, and it was like, hello kids, which did make me crack up, to be honest. But yeah, no, I think it's really fun that they're both coming back to do it. I think, you know, Macau didn't happen for so many years, and Marcus has been quoted as saying, I think actually it wasn't Marcus who was quoted as saying this, but it was the MP team boss, said that Marcus has unfinished business at Macau, so he obviously thinks he can do better than P8, so I hope he does, but I just also hope he doesn't come P13. But yes, after 40 minutes of me talking non-stop, that is everything I know about Macau. Everything. All the background information, the drivers, the teams, where to watch it. I think you know everything now too. I don't think there's anything about Macau that wasn't featured in this podcast. So yeah, you're an expert now. Congratulations. And I really hope you tune into the race when it's on. I really hope you enjoy the race when it's on. I can't wait. Personally, I'm so excited to finally watch my first ever live Macau Grand Prix. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sticking around for 40 minutes to learn everything there is to know about Macau. And yeah, no, I really hope you enjoy the race. Obviously, it's been a bit dry with feeder series at the moment, as I said, with a massive gap between the F2 rounds, F3 having finished. It's nice that, you know, they're giving us something to watch, giving us something to keep us going. So yeah, that's everything. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode. I've been Gemma, down to the Tyre. Bye.